In our last unit, we looked at PowerPoint presentations, which are a type of linear presentation. In this unit, we'll be looking at non-linear presentations, particularly questions. Now, these can occur in two contexts. One is following a PowerPoint presentation in a conference or a thesis defense. The second is in a booth or a poster where the questions are the only thing. There is no standard linear presentation before that. So what is the difference between a linear and a non-linear presentation? Well, in a linear presentation, you have some control over what people will ask, because what you present affects what they will ask. What you emphasize, what you make as your main points, those are the things they're more likely to ask about. And you can choose to leave out things that you think are unimportant or that you really don't want them to ask about. On the other hand, in a non-linear presentation, you have less control. It depends partially, of course, on what you put on your poster, but it's more dependent on what the audience is interested in. And so they may ask about things that you consider to be relatively minor points. So it's a different form of presentation. Now, in a PowerPoint, if you're following a PowerPoint, you can direct your questions to some degree. You can repeat the main point, the things that you want your audience to understand. You can then lead your audience to ask questions about things that you haven't really talked about, but you think they may be interested in. And in this way, you can prepare for certain questions. For instance, when I was doing my PhD dissertation defense on tomato breeding, one of the professors was from the botany department. And so I knew that he was going to ask about the botanical form of tomatoes. Now, botanically, tomatoes are a fruit, not a vegetable, even though in America they're used as a vegetable. And they're a particular type of fruit called a berry that has many seeds inside a fleshy fruit. So I knew he was going to ask about this. And I knew also that following that, once I said it was a berry, that he would ask about other types of fruits that are called berries, like strawberries and raspberries, that botanically are not. And so, sure enough, when we got into the exam, and his first question was, is tomato a fruit or a vegetable? And I said, I know where this is going. And I had to suppress a smile and just answer it straight, because I knew exactly, and I had predicted exactly what he would ask, in what order, and I knew exactly how to answer, and I was very confident as a result. So you can, in a thesis defense, you can to some degree predict, because you know who's going to be there. So what are the types of questions that professors will typically ask in a thesis defense?
There are several points. Number one, the committee members are very curious about your choice of the literature review. They want to know how comprehensive you are in your review and why you chose to talk about something but not something else. Number two, they are very concerned about your choice of methods. They want you to justify why this method is trustworthy, is the best solution. And then they also want you to clarify your data. You may have beautiful tables or figures, but sometimes students' writings are not that clear. They want you to have an opportunity to clarify your interpretations of your data. And then how you do your discussion, whether you have a conversation with the previous literature. And many times students, after completing the results, they are half dead. No energy to do anything else. So many times the discussion section is the poorly written section because students really don't know what to do with that discussion.
So in other words, they would ask about all of those areas of IMRD, the literature review and the introduction, the method and why it's the best, the results, and the discussion. So you should make sure that you have additional data to present. We talked about that. You can use hide slide to keep it in your presentation in case they ask about it. But they may also challenge you to go beyond what you have talked about. Can you comment on that?
For example, if everything is already so perfect, so solid, professors might ask you, what would you do it differently if you could do it again? Just to think if there's another alternative. Or they may ask you, yes, you can present it to the academic circle. What if your parents or your best friends ask you, what did you do for your thesis? Then how do you use common language to express what you did to them so they can see? The parents can say, okay, I paid for it. I paid for your study. It's worth my while. And your friends can say, oh, you have done something so fantastic. I can understand what you did.
And they may also make comments about things that need to be corrected or changed. And the student is expected to make notes of those so that they can go back and change them later.
And sometimes they only put their cell phone there to record everything. That's not sufficient. You still need to write down when the committee members ask you about things so that you know what to check when you go back to your recording.
Right, and that saves time because you don't have to go back and listen to the whole recording to try to find out what they said and hear, which may not be a very good recording. Now, a conference is a different situation because the audience may be very different. So, because they may not be specialized in your field, you may need to spend more time on the introduction, the motivation, the importance, background information, introducing key ideas, methods, definitions. None of that is really necessary in a thesis defense where the focus should be more on the results and discussion. But again, how specialized it is depends on how specialized the conference is, how broad the conference audience is. But again, in a conference, you have the attendees have heard your presentation, but it depends on the stage of your research. Some conferences you go to when it's very early in your research and you're looking for ideas of how to improve it. Other times you're basically done. So you're likely to get different types of comments from different participants. So again, you mentioned there's a difference between novice and expert comments.
Because in a conference, there are so many people from different backgrounds, different levels of understanding of a particular topic. You may have to emphasize the background so they can become familiar with what you're doing. You cannot assume a lot of things, so you have to be explicit. And also, because sometimes there are many stages in your research, or you have already done something. Do not repeat what you have already done, because when people follow your research, they want to see what's your 2.0 version, so they know, oh, you're not just always focusing on, the old stuff. You have something new all the time. That's your reputation.
Right. So novices may ask questions just because they don't know, and then they may be relatively simple to you. On the other hand, experts in the field might challenge you and say, why did you do this? And you either have to provide a justification or you can learn from it and make notes again of things that you can improve in future research.
When they challenge you, many times it's because they have a better solution. So you might as well be humble and ask them, what do you think the best solution is?
Good. So again, another thing to remember, particularly in a conference situation, is maybe you can hear the question because the speaker is directing it toward you, but if they don't have a microphone, the audience may not be able to hear it. So it's good to restate the question before you answer it so that the audience knows what question you're answering. And if you're not clear, as you restate it, you can rephrase it and then say, I want to make sure, is that what you're asking? So that you're answering the question that they're truly asking.
Especially in international conference, a lot of people using English as a lingua franca. It's none of our first language. So you do the audience good service by repeating the question, clarifying the question, and also summarize your results.
Right. And then after you respond, you can still ask again, does that answer your question? Or do you have any further follow-up questions? And don't spend too much time on one person, give other people a chance, but you want to make sure that you have actually answered the question.
And when you ask if there are any other questions, you can also ask any other comments or suggestions.
Right. Now, an international competition like iGEM is sort of halfway in between a conference presentation and a thesis defense, because the judges should have looked at your wiki, so they're somewhat familiar with it, but they haven't read the whole thing in detail in the same way that your committee will. So it's somewhat in between. And because you may not be doing further work on that topic, they may not be asking questions or trying to direct you as much toward future work as you would in either of those other situations. But you also need to consider, are only the judges in the room, or are there other participants? And that then will affect the way that you answer the questions in that situation. Remember, when you're in a situation like this, use the tips from the last unit. Use the slide numbers. If they ask about a certain slide, you just type the number and then enter, and it will move directly to that. You can use the Control S. And if you're working in presentation mode in a Macintosh computer, all the thumbnails are available right on the bottom. In a Windows computer, there's this little icon with 4 boxes, and if you push that, it will bring up all of the thumbnails. And again, that's another way to move quickly to whatever slide is in question.
You also present a very good image of being professional and also technologically savvy.
Right. And remember, you're the expert. No one knows your topic any better than you do. They may know a lot about the general subject, but you're the expert in your research. So relax. Speak confidently. If you don't know the answer, just say so. If it's outside the realm of your research question, that's fine. Just say, this is an interesting question, but it's not part of my work. Do you think that it's important to include that in this particular research, or is that something that I could do in later research?
Especially if you don't know the answer, you can give credit to the person who asked. It's really an important question. You really point out the major point. So it requires further research. I appreciate your question.
Right. And if it's within your area of research, but you don't have the data right there, you can just simply say, I have that data back in my lab, and I can go look it up. Can I send them to you? So that, again, you show your concern for them getting that information if they're truly interested in it. Okay, so in the next tape, we'll be looking at posters and how those are different from conference presentations.